CMMS Radio talks about all things CMMS, computerized maintenance management software, focused on maintenance management. It's the people, the process, and the culture that make your CMMS journey a success.
So I have done a couple of things in the past where smaller businesses said, we're looking for a CMMS. Can you do some work for us? And I'll go and look at half a dozen CMMS systems. And I've got a resource for that in the UK that I can show you. So I don't know whether you know about CompareSoft.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So they don't just do CMMS, but they compare lots of software. And I think the way it works is the software providers pay them a fee to be on their list for, a year or whatever. And it's a really good resource because you can actually go and choose 2 or 3 CMMS systems and put them side by side and see what the kind of price per person is and whether it would fit that business. Is it one that can scale and build, or so that's a good resource.
One of the things I'm always thinking about since I was in the CMMS space, having been a co-founder and had a product of my own for years, is when we're out there, we, not the providers, but customers, users, people that are looking for solutions, they go do their little search and then they end up on, something like that or Capterra or whatever. And it's good information, but at the same time, they don't know what they don't know. And then everything's like from this marketing perspective and it's buzzwords. And something I was thinking about just as recently as yesterday was the pricing models. And personally, I don't like user-based pricing models. Mm-hmm. I think the reason I don't like it is because if I were a client, it limits who I can have participate in the utilization, on my CMMS, because too many orgs out there are price conscious. So I've always thought, hey, if you're going to get a platform and it's for your work order, asset, preventive maintenance management and all that, wouldn't it be great if you could have unlimited users? Everybody, thank you for tuning in. Today, we're going to speak with Andy Gailey, and a lot of you might know him, but some of you might not. And Andy and I have kind of stayed in touch on LinkedIn, chime in on a few things here and there, but he's always kind of moving around and really he's focused in on helping people. So, mechanical production engineer. He's also the owner of Uptime Consultant Ltd, and that's in the United Kingdom. But again, he goes all around, helps people out. A lot of us see those posts and your adventure on LinkedIn. That's where I tend to stick around. So, Andy, welcome to CMMS Radio.
Thanks for having me, Greg. It's great. I love connecting with people and having a chat, just chewing the cud on things.
Yeah, I like it. It. And we, not too many rules around here other than we want to be mindful not to talk about specific products. I do it sometimes, but because some of them we like, some of them we don't. But you and I were talking a little bit before I hit record, and this idea about being agnostic, what's good about it, a lot of people say it, but what's good about it for you is that you want to really get in there and help. And so I wanted to read a quote. Here's a quote. I spend my waking hours thinking or talking about reliability and maintenance. How did I end up like this? What can you tell us about that?
Well, yeah, that could be a positive or a negative. So sometimes my other half, Jenny, who's my partner in life and in the business, so we're co-founders of the business, and we'll be more on that later. It can be a burden because I can be awake at 3 a.m. thinking about this podcast, or I could be thinking about a conference, a keynote I'm doing tomorrow. So the thing is that all of these things about reliability and maintenance and engineering, I thoroughly enjoy so much. It's one of those things where people say, if you do something you love and you're passionate about, you're the happiest kind of worker in the world. So it doesn't feel like work because it genuinely is a 7-day, 24-hour in my head thing. And it's for me, reliability is a philosophy, it's a way of life rather than just something you try to apply in the workplace. Um, and that trickles down with everything I do, really. So yeah, I ended up that way because I've always been curious. As a child, um, I was lucky. I had a dad who was an older dad, and he was he wasn't qualified as a mechanic, but he was very mechanically always messing with cars and bikes, and from the age of kind of 6 or 7, he got me putting chains on off bikes and lubricating them. And we actually lived when I was from about 2 till 7. I lived actually above a local garage, and my dad ran the garage. So
Mm,
I would walk through the workshop to school. I smelt probably my first memory was of engine oil and petrol and or gasoline and diesel. So it was almost like it was infused in me, this thing. Um,
yeah. That
yeah,
there's nothing like it. Like I'm not saying, that I was on your level with that kind of exposure, but you talk about what an impact that makes, and it reminds me of something like I think this is a global kind of a thing happening right now, but in North America, we're all worried about, well, why don't kids growing up go into the trades or have an interest in things like maintenance or anything that maintenance serves, such as manufacturing, those types of things. But we're starting to see some progress there. But I think that experience can really have a major impact on how you journey through this world, and kind of it almost invites you, it pulls you, because the familiarity, and you see how it's really working, right?
yeah.
Even if you're talking about a auto repair garage, that matters in the real world in many different ways. So when it comes to your what you do on consulting, and when you go into various production environments, is there
Okay, okay, go on.
that's weird.
I
I
lost
bumped
it.
something. You lost
Yeah, I
me?
lost it for a minute. Yeah, yeah, carry on.
So when you're in these environments, um what is the first thing you tend to look for when you go into an environment and you're going to try to solve a problem? What do you look for when you take it in?
Okay, well, people call me for many different reasons, and it's because I actually set myself up as a jack of all trades, really. I call myself a generalist. So my background is production engineering, actually as a machinist in prototyping, and I spent all of my formative years. I apprenticed as a prototype machinist, and I spent my formative years in turbines and motorsport, and I fell into the food industry. The first thing I would want to know is what's the communication between the C level, the middle management, the shop floor, and the operator group. And more often than not, I want to go and speak to the operator group, because if somebody's called me in about lubrication or condition monitoring, or some of the technologies or the strategy, I need to find out who's talking to who, um, and also you said environment. I'm looking at the environment. So the environment can tell me a lot about what I should be advising the client what to target with any aspect of reliability or maintenance. So an example of that would be my first kind of major client was Nissan here in the UK, and the very first training session I did with frontline engineers was in the body shop, and that's where obviously they bring the panels together, and about 1,000, 1,200 robots weld these bodies together. And when we were walking up to the building, I said to them, they've got a real problem because I could taste carbon. So if I can taste carbon outside the building, I know that we're going to have a carbon intensive atmosphere, which we did with obviously the rods being welded. Um, and so that was one of my first things. Okay, we haven't got water like the food industry. We haven't got massive heat like the food industry, so those are stressors. What we've got is a heavily laden carbon atmosphere, which is the thing to kind of concentrate on.
Now,
It's
and then what do you do then once you realize that? Does that cause you to really focus in on that right away, or do you kind of hold that back until you learn more about the facility and the operations?
Yeah, well, usually what I'll do is, and again, I'll, I'll really have a remit when I go in. So we've already done like, this is what the client would like, and then we have a discussion about it. And then obviously there's a framework that I put forward and said, well, this is what I can deliver. And I usually do the first interaction is only 1 or 2 days because, and I keep it at that because if it's a new client, I need to find out if we can work together in the future. So I'll always suggest to them, keep it keep it simple. Let's do a training day where I come and train some engineers or operators in a specific uh, kind of area. So the one people like the most is an introduction to condition monitoring and lubrication, and that'll include some touches on RCM. Um, and within that workshop, I'll find out how the engineers tick. I'll understand who are the leaders, who are the followers, how the maintenance or engineering manager reacts with all of that work. And then at the end of that, when I deliver obviously the report, we have a discussion whether I can work with them anymore and whether they would like to work with me. Because as you can tell, I'm near the end of my working career, and uh, I'm adverse to wasting time. I can't
Mm.
waste time. I don't do it for money. So if I don't do it for money and I can't waste time, then we have to have common ground where I can enjoy working with them and I can see that they've got the commitment to go ahead. Um,
That is really interesting to me because I've always had this interesting, and I don't know if it's bullshit or not. So like I talk openly about it. I'm very I try to be transparent about things that I'm thinking. You know, many people might say never let anybody know what you're thinking. I don't care. Like maybe I do care, like enough to actually share it. So I think about how money can really get in the way of passion and intent. It can really screw things up.
yeah,
And I think a lot of people know that, but people need money. They want money. They got things to take care of. But when you get to a certain point and you have that ability, that option, that intent, that will, and there's people that'll do it even if they don't have money. They'll say, I don't care about that part. But to get in and help and make sure there's going to be a productive, wholesome relationship, that's good for everyone. And one of the things I talk about on the podcast, and people probably get tired of it, but I'm going to keep saying it, is the pursuit of this win-win, where when we do business, when we work with people, we want it to be full circle. We want everyone to benefit. That includes the person that's doing the consulting, the teaching, the guidance, the fixing, the solving. That includes the people that are involved and receiving that guidance and interaction. And I think it's a really, in other words, I think it's a healthy thing to have that way of moving through these engagements. And it's not meant to be negative. It's meant to focus in on the right application of your valuable time, their valuable time, the results they want to get. So, and that actually speaks to reliability concepts in and of itself, because one of the key things you want to do is find and eliminate waste. So it's really interesting how that's kind of like
yeah.
it's in your DNA almost. I want to ask, where in this whole process does the CMMS come into play when you're assessing, for example, in a plant, uh, their culture, their people, their process or processes? Where does the CMMS fit in as far as improving what they have going on, or does it come later when you focus in first on the people and the process?
Also, again, sometimes, for example, I'll be called in to run a criticality process on an existing line or a brand new, um, just been installed line, so one that's been installed. And in that process, I come in as a lone ranger really, and I will go and gather all the information. So all the obviously the manuals, digital and hard copy, go and dig into libraries if it's old, really old equipment. Have to go online and Google stuff and find out exactly what that was, and bring together all that information. And then it goes to the bit where I interact with the technician group or the maintenance group. And then we'll obviously talk to the operators as well, because they'll have some really good anecdotal information I can bring into that criticality. And I'm looking at it always because the basis of Uptime Consultant, my philosophy is based on the reliability centered maintenance philosophy. So it starts there. So everything I do, I don't run RCMs, but I refer to that when I'm looking at, right, we need to put as little invasive maintenance in as possible. We want to put condition monitoring, on condition lube, and we want to get our people who, if they've got skills missing, identify the skills where we can improve their worth to the business. And the CMMS will come in there because the other bit that comes out of obviously the criticality, I work on that, is when we've identified the critical spares, and that's not what the OEM says, that's what the business requirement is to run that equipment's availability. We will then discuss that with the client, and I'll say, well, what's your appetite for risk? And we'll agree on this. Okay, the OEM said buy $60,000 worth of spares, and actually we only need $12,000 worth of spares. So my ROI is straight away evident. So I go, well, here you go. We've now got some. We're going to order some spares and put them in your CMMS. And this is where I usually find how good or bad that system operates. Usually what I find is most systems are pretty good, but it's the way. It's almost like when people get a new system, they want to put something in it. So they think, right, I'm going to put loads of planned maintenance into it, and it ends up a nightmare. Or they haven't thought even about the basics of, well, what am I going to call this bearing? And they go, well, I'm going to call it a roller bearing. So they go roller bearing and go, hang on a minute, let's think about it. It's a bearing. Let's call it a bearing. Let's go. We've got to have a hierarchy, and it's got to be formulated so that it fits in the CMMS. So you can go and look for all of the bearings. Then you look for all the roller bearings. Then you look for all, so by size or by seal.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the times it's not the CMMS systems, it's the human interaction with the systems. Some of them are very clunky, so they'll expect people to have to move through 10 screens to do one simple thing. There's a very, very big operating system that I've had very little to do with, and it's because I've seen what it looks like. And that has like,
Sorry, you made me laugh.
yeah, it has like a 16 letter and number acronym you put in, and it means absolutely nothing. It's gobbledygook. And every single maintenance and engineering guy I come into contact with that uses that system wants to end their life, really. They're not. No, I'm not finding one fan of it. Big, massive enterprise system. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure I did come across one guy who was a whiz kid at it, and he was an Indian guy, about 22, and he'd actually worked on installing these systems since he was 18, and he was a guru. He was an Indian guru on making this system work. But the problem was he was a single point of failure, because if he left the business, they were going to be lost.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Th- So these are so lately I've been posting about things like, what are CMMS companies getting wrong, or what are they missing? And sometimes it happens without their own awareness, because obviously these are businesses and different people get involved and you have to grow. And then you end up with these situations where, so the example you gave, when you have a singular source of as your resource as a client user of such a platform, now you've got super high risk. And then the goal of translating that guru's knowledge, at least some semblance of it, into other trainers and implementers, you can kind of get there, but it's really hard to do. And I think when I look at the world of CMMS, I want the CMMS to first be based on a philosophy, a process that existed without the CMMS. And then it was built to satisfy that. And then it goes out into the world. And then, of course, it gets all buzzy and marketing people go, oh, we can serve this industry because we just picked up one client. Let's tell everybody about it. And, oh, well, we're kind of an EAM too, or the other way around. I hate all that stuff because for the clients, they don't know what to do. But getting back to this idea of what you talked about with that solution, there's some great solutions out there where at these solution providers, they're also incorporating the right kind of knowledge that can carry forward and internally that knowledge of how to leverage the system properly. And they're doing it within the framework of maintenance and reliability best practices. And I think that's a really, really good thing. I also tend to tell people that you're not out there looking for a perfect system. You're looking for the system that your people, one, will use, and two, it'll get you the outputs that you want, and three, that regardless of who leaves your team, you're the customer that uses the CMMS, or whoever leaves that provider's team, you should still be able to function. You should still be able to figure it out. It should not be rocket science, because is it fair to say that the idea of computerized maintenance management software is they go too far? They just pack in way too many unnecessary
Yeah,
features.
I have open conversations with CMMS providers at shows, and I'm always interested to hear their pitch to me. And then my feedback will be, you're telling me about bells and whistles. I'm, I don't want bells and whistles. I want a technician. So the CMMS is hard because it kind of has to cover a lot of bases. Procurement's got to be able to use it, and the planning department, the scheduling department, the engineering maintenance manager wants his crystal report or whatever out of it. And then the big user in population are probably engineering technicians or the trades. They got 5 or 10 minutes a day out of a 12-hour shift where they have to interact with something that if it's on a desktop and it's clunky and it doesn't work and it glitches, they ain't doing it. They're not doing it. And because of the demographics of our business, our trade as maintenance engineers, unfortunately, I go and talk to people that all look like me. They all look like me. They're all my cohort. We're all in our mid 50s to 60s. There is refreshing. You do see some guys in their 20s and 30s. Very few females. Um, so yeah, some of the guys I'm okay to type. I can touch type, but they're kind of doing this business.
Yeah.
Whereas them, and if they've got to try and fill a field in, and you're going to give them something they've got to type in, well, their 10 minutes is gone. So it has to be intuitive. The drop down boxes have to be a limited amount of fields that actually mean something, not something that somebody at the software company thought fit the business, but actually means something to the business. So I can understand it's a hard one to fulfill because you've got to please everybody all the time, and sometimes, obviously, the engineer on the shop floor, sometimes they think the CMMS is built to beat them up, so they'll only hear the bad things about what they haven't done.
Mm.
So the feedback will be, well, you didn't fill the timing right, or you didn't put the parts in, or you didn't put the 5-way in, or you did, and nobody goes to. I don't see it. Goes to engineers and operators that use the systems, puts their arm around them and says, "Oh, well, if you didn't know how to do that, let me just show you." And the problem is that we need those mentors on the shop floor to go put their arm around and say, "Well, it's not your fault. You don't know. Let's show you how to do it. Now you do it." And do you understand? And that you've got to do that piece of work that says, look, lads, we're not trying to beat you up with tracking your time. We're not trying to say justify your role. We want to capture this information so that we can increase the availability of our assets. Because at the end of the day, it's not about using the CMMS system. It's about providing value for the business. It's just a tool. unfortunately, some of them are clunky, and then the onboarding can be really poor, so teach a few super users, but you don't talk to the guys that you expect to uh,
Yeah,
fill the work orders in and put the comments in.
and so, like, in fairness, out there in the world of CMMS or related, similar, and all the people that could use, might benefit from them, everybody works differently. They've got different levels of maintenance maturity. They've got different levels of resistance to technology, because a maintenance technician and an operator will tolerate technology that fits within what they do. But if you took away the technology, the thing that they do, they typically do really well anyway. And it's like, it sometimes doesn't make sense. So if you're just saying, "Hey, you got to use this or else," it's like, no, it's got to make sense, and then you got to tie that to the business. But the reason there's so many CMMS type solutions out there is because everybody works differently. Eventually, somebody's in some. And here's another thing: sometimes we'll be out there, putting up posts about how the last thing we need is another CMMS, and I've been thinking about that too. I don't think that is necessarily true, but it kind of is. In other words, if we built another one that met a certain process and environment, it would then start to work in another environment. And, if there's 500 out there, now you've got 501. There's going to be another 10 or 20 or 30 that get born,
Yeah,
because not everybody's using them. And when they go to look at one and they start to use one and it doesn't work, they're like, this is so painful, we're going to just build our own. And then
yeah,
it finds its way out into the world again. But what you're talking about with the training protocols, I've always kind of thought the idea of some super users that can internally train along with breakout groups. I think it's an absolute must for every company that provides a CMMS to provide that as an option to their clients, even if you have to charge for it. And I wish you didn't, but things cost money. And then for the clients, they should be steadfast about the fact that, hey, we need something that's an actual effective training protocol for our team. So work with your clients out there, CMMS people, and build them nice videos so they can have a library of how to train. And then when you change your system and something changes, go and update that. I know you won't, because you can't, because you're moving too fast and you got to chase your number and satisfy private equity. But, ooh, that was a dig. Sorry. my my whole thing is, I think we all get it, and I think the CMMS providers get it, but they can't. Like, they're not allowed to. Do you see that too as kind of an issue where
yeah, yeah.
they're bottled
Going
up?
back to the shop floor thing, so my experience, I worked in the PepsiCo business for 21 years, and I saw 3 different CMMS systems through those 21 years, and the last one, um, I was a super user on, because I was putting new equipment on, putting parts on, raising work requests for people and closing requests down. And because that was part of what I did as being the practitioner, condition monitoring and lubrication guy on site for the whole plant. Now, the only way I could engage the operator group to be my eyes and ears, because I needed people to tell me when they heard something or saw something. So I made a point of obviously going, and when I went and visited people with my equipment, I'd put my equipment down and ask John how the wife is. Did he go fishing at the weekend? And we would have a rapport. And then he'd say, "Oh, by the way, the OIT screen this morning at 7:30, this happened on the oven," and we talk about that. But also, I would kind of say, "Okay, let's just grab the CMMS screen on the OIT, John. Here you go. Let's put your name in." And then I would raise the request with him. I wouldn't say to him, "You raise a request for that, and then I'll come and have a look at it with my instruments." I would I would go half the way for them. I would say, "This is," and it would be a case of, "Well, this is for you, really, because somebody will see that you've raised this, and this will obviously great work. You've actually done this." I was never ever one of those just walk past. I would try and help people into that. Oh, okay, yeah, I can do that. Because a lot of times the operators are like, "Well, I can't do that." I said, "Well, you can." it's a case of confidence half the time.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I mean, it was good in the PepsiCo plant because I was given an open remit, and they didn't say, "Oh, you don't do that." Anything I wanted to do, as long as it could provide a benefit for the business, get on, do it.
Yeah.
And if, in actual fact, if you did it and it failed, good job, because we know it failed. We can move on to the next stage.
Yeah. You
So
can take it off the list.
yeah, so there was a lot of I had enough rope to hang myself when I was there, and so I was able to kind of reinvent some of the predictive stuff we did. Um, but also, I think the human aspect is the biggest bang per buck. So if you can support your technical operators and your operator groups, their confidence jumps, and they 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 enjoy their job more than just pressing buttons and writing down figures. And that was another thing that I saw as well was an issue with the machine. They'd be expected to write it on a whiteboard, and then you'd expect them to put it in the CMMS system. So I just said to the manager, "That's a load of rubbish. This is the tool." Because I didn't care. I used to say things to managers to make them aware that if you're asking somebody to fill in the whiteboard, put it down on a piece of paper, then put it in the CMMS, they're going to miss one of them two out or three out.
Yeah.
Um, so put it in the CMMS, then put the work order number on the wall. If you want the work order number, because half the time it's because the managers didn't know how to use the CMMS, so they wanted it written on the wall.
That's,
That's it.
really interesting that you brought that up. Uh, One of the things, so I would say if you talk to any maintenance and reliability practitioner, I've talked to a lot of them, and I'm not one of them, right? Meaning I don't have that credential. I haven't been in as many environments as they have and put these things to the test. I've worked with people and tried to figure out ways to help them keep moving forward, which is really what it's all about within the context of what we're trying to deliver. And when you take this approach of identifying what's overcomplicating a scenario, a situation, there's an opportunity right there. I think one of the things is you go from the whiteboard to the paper, then to the CMMS, and if you can eliminate those first two and go straight to the CMMS, you're saving time, you're eliminating redundancies, and redundancies sometimes have a place. They really do. However, in this case, if those precious minutes are 5, 10, 15 minutes a day, that's actually going to add up pretty quickly. And then what also happens is those folks that don't know how to use, you talked about that they don't know how to use the CMMS to look up what they're asking to be put on the whiteboard. That's pretty easy to fix from a training perspective, but what's hard to fix is their behavior.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
if that's allowed to continue, then it doesn't it doesn't ever change.
yeah.
So
If
you
you
the whole
if
point is
you
if I
if
do something and then you don't look at it, then why am I going to use it?
yeah, and the thing is, if you give a human 2 or 3, opportunities to do the same thing, they'll find the easiest route. So if the easiest route is to write it on the whiteboard, they'll do that and they'll forget the other 2. Um, so again, by giving them the options, it sends the wrong message. Um, but there was there was that was a downside to that industry. There was a lot. I mean, I wish I had shares in whiteboards because the amount of whiteboards that were put up and then taken down and put up again, and they were everywhere.
Mm.
And yeah, it was. I don't know. There's that kind of. I don't know what the whiteboard thing's all about. Yeah, if you need one there to map out some thoughts while you're working, yeah, but not like. I mean, these are like 20 foot long and 4 foot high,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people just walk past them, straight past them.
I used to think it would be really cool for, an organization that's kind of dialed in, leveraging their CMMS, and maybe it has to do with the ERP, all this, right? If there was like one area where there's like a a large screen TV that they could just, as they're walking, they could see stuff that's going on, but they don't have to stop. They don't have to do much. Almost
I
like when you're at the airport and you want to see what's going on. I
I
think.
did I did see that in a paper mill, in
Oh
a
yeah.
corrugated, it was Smurfit Kappa, and they had, you know, big LED TVs back to back. So it didn't matter what end of the shop you were at, you looked up and you could see the throughput. You could see all of the metrics you needed to see that was going on with the paper mill. You know, as you walk down the shop, as you walk past, and it was, they say they were back to back, so they were both sides of the line, because it was just like a single corrugate line in there.
So
Yeah, that works.
speaking of paper mill, so I've got a good friend of mine. His name's Matthew Knuth, and we talk about a lot of this stuff, not on the podcast, but off the podcast. So we really get going. And so I want to ask you, and he's a condition monitoring specialist himself, maintenance and reliability professional, etc. So when it comes to the condition monitoring as well as lubrication, where and how do these things play with the CMMS, and how do they show up for the business to make a positive impact?
So when I was asked to go and invent the condition monitoring and lube program for the plant back in 2006, and again I had a really forward-looking manager that said, "We know you are a completer finisher. When you do something, you're tenacious and you'll get it done." And so I actually thought about the process first, rather than, I didn't just jump on tools and go, right, what am I going to look at? I thought about, well, I need to get the business value out of this first. So I thought it from a business value point of view. And I knew that because I worked for PepsiCo, I had to show ROI. So I actually thought about, if I'm going to find a fault with a machine, because that's going to be part of my job, not all of it, but part of my job is to go out there and find the 3 or 5%, because that's all you'll get, of everything I ever touch. I need to capture that and uh, put it in a spreadsheet. So I actually use a separate spreadsheet from the CMMS, because there wasn't the facility to do it. But everything I raised against condition monitoring fines had in brackets CM, so I could search it all. And that work order request to replace that bearing planned downtime, I then tracked that through a spreadsheet, and I captured the real hours, not some manufactured hours. So if it took them an hour to replace it in planned, I wouldn't say, well, that would take us 3 hours in unplanned. I'd just capture that as an hour. We had 7 lines, production lines. So I broke it down into production lines. It was nearly all focused on process, because packaging, the amount of redundancy built into packaging, it wasn't really worth doing anything but direct feed conveyors. Once we broke it down into after about 6 months, I'd got enough information in there to say, yeah, the lines we think are critical, line 1 and line 2 and line 4, yes, they do correlate. And the hard thing to get was a value. So the value, because most places now, especially PepsiCo, they're cost centers.
Mhm.
So they don't make money, they are cost centers. So you had to get, the only thing I could get was the cost it took to man a line. So the amount of money it took to man a line for 1 hour. So in the case of Doritos, it was around £1,500, $1,800. So I'll just say, okay, I'm going to capture that hour. That's $1,800. It's a lot more than that, because you could have made 2 ton of product in that time that you'd lost. And capture that and then actually report that as an overall figure. After the first year of doing it, and for the kind of 9 years I was doing that, there were 6-figure sums, and there were over £500,000 a year myself and one other guy were doing out of the condition monitoring, picking up things to report to the business. The lubrication's harder to report ROI on. At the start, we had fixed time lubrication. I inherited fixed time lubrication intervals on bearings. So, say a Dorito oven, it would say every 7 days, go and lubricate all the bearings. And then every 14 days, go and lubricate all the bearings. Every 21 days, every 28 days. So it didn't take a mathematician to look at this and go, this is nuts, because if I get to the 28-day one, I could be a technician on a weekend and I do a 28, a 14 and a 7. I do 3 of the same work orders, grab 6 hours time and probably not do the lubrication properly because they hadn't been trained. The main problem with the lot of the lubrication was misapplication or over lubrication. There was
Mm,
hardly anything going on with under lubrication. It was all too much. So everything that it could touch within arm's reach got hit. Everything that was out of arm's reach didn't get touched.
mm,
Um, there were some automatic lubricators on where you couldn't get to very easily. After I went and looked at those a few months into the program, none of them worked. So this is the dichotomy: is that people go auto lubricators, you can put them on, they'll work for 6 months, and you go and inspect them, take them off, and you put a new one on. None of them had enough gas pressure in them to overcome the pressure to deliver lubricant to the bearing pack. So every one I took off, they just exploded with new lubricant. Um, so I'm an advocate of, if you can hit it with a manual grease gun, um, using on condition. So you're going to use ultrasound as a touch sensor, or I use a lot of acoustic emission when I was doing it because that's what I had. So that meant that when I used to go, then actually the first bit I did, I took all the lubrication practices out of Dorito ovens, even out of the planned downtime maintenance the technicians are doing. And me and my other partner, who's on the other shift, we owned all of the lubrication, which was high temperature lube on ovens, only by condition. Nobody else touched them. Our bearing life went through the roof compared with what we were exposed to previously, because the major thing that my boss said, I said, "What do you really want me to do?" He said, "I want to wear an oven belt out rather than tearing the side of an oven off because the bearing pack's disintegrated. I need you to get something that's going to keep the lubricant in a fryer bearing." Um, and yeah, I don't want to have to start, I don't want to have to keep buying reams and reams of these imperial sized bearings for Casa ovens. Because we're in the UK, obviously Casa Herrera made the ovens, great ovens, but everything that we had to put on them was imperial. So we'd have to actually buy Rexnord bearings in from the US and get them shipped, get them air freighted. And we were using so many of these things at one point, it was like we could barely keep them on the shelf. And when I started, they were actually running out of the mesh belt, which again was flown from Casa Herrera because it was an imperial size. So there was a massive win there. We put that to bed within 12 months. Within 12 months, the bearing failures went. We replaced all the bearing packs that had got the wrong grease in. We actually, after 2 years, we wore an oven belt out. The problem is with condition monitoring and lubrication, though, you're always like Cinderella. You never go to the ball
mm.
because it's you never get praised for good work. Not that I'm after praise, but nobody ever goes, "Wow, this is amazing." You know, we haven't. Obviously, there's some people like the engineering manager said, "Oh, this is great. We've worn a belt out." Um, but after about a year, everybody turns over and nobody remembers that good work anyway. So you're like, you just have to take it and move on.
Yeah. That's the constant in this world anyway. That, well, I mean, obviously it's a generalization, but it kind of works really, really well for almost everything. Is that all things are going to run their course, and you're going to have to redo it. People are going to leave that they were big champions of the program that was put in place. Like everybody's like, why are you guys, like you and I or anybody else? We're all talking about the same stuff over and over and over again, and the answer is because that's how it is, and you have to maintain the awareness.
Yeah.
And with all of our advancements and all this great technology, half of which is bullshit anyway, it doesn't even do what it says it's going to do. It lulls us into a false sense of security. And I've got some friends like, well, you probably the guys at Reliability X, right?
Yes, yes. Joe
So
Anderson, I know Joe well.
Joe Anderson, George Williams,
George, yeah.
and one of the things we were talking about, and I've talked to other people about this, like if you're really, really as a maintenance and reliability practitioner, you're what you're trying to do is work yourself out of a job.
Yes,
But
yes, yes,
but
that's what I say.
the reason that's unlikely or temporary, if you were to achieve that pinnacle, like ultimate availability,
Yeah,
safety is there, all these things, and you've got a facility, you've done a turnaround, and now it's in a state of constant process improvement, right? This is exactly what we want. Whether you support those theories or not doesn't matter. That's what you want. Boom, 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 boom. Well, at some point, somebody there is going to leave. Somebody there is going to retire. Somebody new is going to parachute in and go, what is this? What is this $200,000 we're spending a year for this, and this? Get rid of that shit. And the guy that would have said, if you do that, that's going to cost us $1 million. He's already gone,
yeah.
and there's nobody there that can fight
Uh,
for it.
yeah, I
And they
was that
keep
guy.
say
I
that again. Who?
I was that guy 9 years ago. Myself and Jenny worked for PepsiCo till 2015, and I was happy to leave under redundancy. Jenny kind of not as easy to convince about change, but
Mhm.
I said, "Oh, no, we've got this great idea. Let's build this company." And, yeah, when we first kind of came up with think, well, it's gonna be consultancy, so we're gonna call it this. And the Uptime thing actually came around because I actually didn't know about Uptime, the book, or
Oh yeah,
Uptime, the
yeah, yeah, yeah,
pamphlet in the US.
yeah.
But I always used to, I'm a contrarian by nature. So if somebody tells me something's a certain way, I'll say, prove it. Uh, and we used to have these meetings with engineering techs, with planning and maintenance, and they'd always go bang on and on and on about downtime, 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 downtime. And at the end of these meetings, I always used to throw the bomb in and say, can we not talk about the uptime? Because we should be accentuating the positive and not banging on all the time about the downtime, because we've got to change the story. We're talking downtime, operations are hearing it. They're saying maintenance is about downtime, therefore they're bad. I said we should be selling to operations that we are the arbiters of their availability, and we should be banging on about uptime constantly. Um, I don't think they ever got the message, but as soon as I decided to name the company, it was going to be Uptime something, and then I had to bite the bullet and say consultant because I wasn't going to do services. I wasn't particularly going to do condition monitoring. I wanted to do everything.
Mhm.
And consultant in the UK it's got a bad rap. It's like if you mention criticality with that C, people go, "Oh, that's expensive and waste of time." And if you say consultant, they say the same thing. You're expensive and you're a waste of time. Um, I don't care to be honest, because I just go, well, I need. I have two or three clients all the time that I do really good work for. They appreciate it. They pay me on time. We have a happy life. And then occasionally I pick up another client, maybe once a year, and then I keep revisiting the old clients on occasion. But the business is built on giving us the lifestyle we want at our time in life. So we owe nothing to the bank. I owe nothing to the tax man. Uh, I haven't got any personal debts. So when I say I can afford, I do this for free, I literally, it's like we're a not non-profit business. Pays Jenny her director's salary, and anything extra is cream. Really, we're just
Yeah.
yeah,
This this is the this is kind of how it goes for a lot of folks. At some point, they enter this consulting arena, and it's like everything else. CMMS, big. What does that mean? Consulting. Well, there's all different types, and well, no, they're really advocates. Yep, but everybody calls them consultants. So it spins out. And this is what's important about like having you on the podcast, that people can understand and have some insight about that, and this idea of lifestyle and doing the work that you want to do, that you care for, that you would do no matter what, right?
Yeah,
And that it does generate revenue, but it only generates revenue because it made the positive impact at the organization that you consulted. Now you've got that full win-win, and you can just keep doing that, and it's not a rinse and repeat. It's a way of being, which is really hard to do because that doesn't scale. And a lot of people in overall business,
yeah,
if things don't scale, they don't think it's viable. And it is. It's just a different kind of viability. It's for something else. It's for long-term sustained results and
yeah,
really strong relationships, a big network, but a small number of clients. And that's just got nothing but upside to it when we're talking about uptime. And uptime should be harped all the time, because that can be a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual, biannual win that you track. And if the most important metric of all is the wins, of course, leave out things like catastrophic failures and people getting hurt and stuff like that. But wins, if you, everybody talks about improve 1% every day. Well, that's a lot. And uptime is a reflection of that. So I used to say for years, scheduling your downtime to do the kind of maintenance that increases uptime is what you should be doing, because that's throughput.
yeah.
That's all
Well,
it is.
that
Go ahead.
that year in 2006, we had a marked change where I, as a technician, and other technicians were removed from the production lines and asked to do other things. So some became product specialists, others became specialists in setting up and running TC lines, and I went into the kind of condition monitoring and lubrication field. And the whole idea of that was it was almost like ground zero. And they said, right, we've been doing this for 10 years in this plant, and we are hurting because we can't provide the tonnage that the clients need. Um, the availability really sucked. It was bad. So they knew they had to invest in us to go away and to do other things. And they upskilled the operator group into technical operators. And we helped some of our guys, technicians, went and became trainers to train operators rather than to be with them on packaging lines. They actually trained them to run packaging lines. And the biggest thing that happened was that there was an operations manager. So there was always like operations, engineering, and they were like, "Can you give us a line for a day?" "No, you can't, because we need it, and you let us down last time." So there's always this conversation going on between, well, we needed to do good work, and they say we can't have it because we don't trust you. What happened was the operations manager was seconded, which is a normal thing in PepsiCo, to go and run a logistics department for a year. So he was seconded, and my boss, direct boss, the engineering manager, was given the role on site. They said, you're going to have to do operations and engineering. Now, obviously, it's a big, big task to do, but all of a sudden things started to work because Paul, his name was Paul, he he had two hats, and he had his operations and his engineering maintenance hat on, and he had to become the customer and client himself. So he then knew that to get operations uh, throughput up, the kind of the yields up and the availability up, you had to do the right thing with engineering. So he actually started giving engineering more time to do the things they needed to do, and he proved within that year that the availability went through the wind through the roof, and the unplanned downtime did one of them. So the unplanned downtime went like that, and the availability went like this. And this was the story I described when I was invited to um, Reliable Plant in 2023 last year.
Yeah,
And Jim
Orlando.
Pitcher, and I went and described that story from the PepsiCo plant where they took a rain check and said, right, we've got to do something. Let's reinvent what we're doing. And over those kind of next 4 or 5 years, we went like unbelievable, went to world class standard. We were over 95% availability, up from kind of 73%. Our downtime went from double figures to less than 2% over that time. And we were like period on period, not just one period. It was like 1.8, 1.9, 2.1, 1.7. It was and we made sure we kept the metrics the same. So we didn't try and dilute the metrics at all or make us look better. We were quite hard on that. And yeah, uptime through the roof.
Yeah, I think I missed that presentation because I got sick at that at
Oh, yeah,
Reliable
yeah.
Plant 2023. I was there and I got sick, so I
Okay.
was in my room for 2.5 days.
Oh,
It was
wow, wow.
terrible. Oh,
It
it was
was really, I
terrible.
mean, for me, it was red hot. I mean, imagine me coming from here and
Oh
it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
38
That's
degrees and humidity like 80 odd percent. And
oh, it's terrible, right? It's like, oh man,
but then
everybody's
when
like,
you go
hey,
in, but then when you go in the conference center and the hotel is like freezing cold,
yeah, yeah,
so
it's
no
true.
wonder people got ill.
Any chance we'll see you at Reliable Plant 2025? It's going to be in Chicago.
Yeah, well, I was invited this year,
Yeah.
2024. Uh, we we had some of the things on at the same time. One of those is about the only kind of major reliability event we've got on in the UK. Coincided the early part of June. It's
Hmm.
called Main Tech, which is a big show. Um, so I was involved with some of that, not presenting, but with being there. So I
Yeah.
couldn't really we couldn't really make it. And we are thinking about, well, Jim said, well, uh, yeah, we'd like to see it 2025. So fingers crossed. We'll have to see how the business goes because it's always a kind of, well, it's like feast and famine.
Yeah.
So you get, at the moment, I've got a lot of clients lined up, and we've got lots of work to the end of November. Then we take about a month out in December, go on holiday,
Yeah.
uh, and then we'll come back and probably re kick off in February. So the idea of the business is that we do uh, as much work as we need to do in a short period of time. And once we get to the end of that, if we've got no clients coming forward, we'll switch off and we'll go and do what we want to do. Um, so yeah, that works well. It's worked for 9 years, so
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. No,
good.
I love it. I admire it. I think it's really hard, but it's really fulfilling. And the thing I tell people a lot, I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I can tell you what to do.
Yeah,
um, do things that are really, really hard because the more you do them, you get better at it. They don't get easier. You just get better at it. That's all it is. If you watch somebody run a touchdown, it's really hard,
yeah,
but they get better and better. It's the same thing in your maintenance and reliability, how you run your businesses, how you run your life, how you utilize your CMMS platform. But as everybody should know, this is not always about the CMMS as a software solution. It's more about the maintenance management and the people in the process in the middle. So
yeah.
first, Andy, I love what you've shared so far, and I hope
I,
you're there in
I'm a
2025
big
at
I'm a big kind of people person. That's the thing. So the challenge I enjoy is when I go to a new client and I sometimes so I'll say I'll go, well, I'll sell you um, an introduction to condition monitor or I did last one I did was a lubrication deep dive and lubrication.
Mm,
Of course, I get about 6 or 8 guys turn up, and hopefully they've been pre-warned and they've been treated right. Sometimes they're not, and they're coming to the room and say, well, we didn't know about this. So then I enjoy that challenge of within the first 15 minutes, I have to sell to them I'm going to give them a really good day. They're going to enjoy it. That I was then once sitting the other side, and that we're going to any question they've got they can field, If I don't know, I'll tell them I don't know, but we'll go and find out together. And I like that. I like it when I get somebody who's really anti in the room. That it's a challenge to me to turn their thinking around by lunchtime.
Yeah.
So you get these guys like this with their arms folded and their legs crossed, and yeah, and looking at the ceiling.
That's uh, but I hope we would agree. I think it's one of the best qualities of maintenance people that they're real and they're sometimes
Yes,
skeptical and they're not afraid to show it because they know if you're real, you're going to get through it. Is that
usually
fair?
the first thing I do is so if my job is to teach them about condition monitoring and doing something proactive with predictive technologies. Some might say, "Oh yeah, yeah, I've seen that before and it doesn't work." And then I'll say, "Okay, well, how much planned maintenance do you do here?" And they'll say, "Oh, we do loads of it." I'll say, "Well, how much backlog you got?" We've got thousands. Got thousands of work orders in backlog. I said, "So what's your unplanned downtime like? What's your availability like?" "Oh, we're struggling." I said, "So you're going to tell me that what you're doing is a positive thing for the business, that you've got loads of planned maintenance going on that doesn't provide value, that provides a lack of availability, and you've got all of this stuff in backlog. Basically, you must just write it off because anything in backlog for me, you should sift it. But anything in backlog, if it's more than a week or 2 weeks old, forget it. It's history. It's never going to give you anything more than what's already in the system. So there's all this. If I can say to them, if what you're going to sell to me, what you're doing now is great, and you don't want to listen to me about a different way of thinking of being proactive, um, then you've got screw loose. It's nuts. And they kind of, you see the penny drop. They go, oh yeah, maybe he's right. It's I don't think I. It's a hard thing to do because when I started off in business, I had to learn a lot of new skills, building websites and all of that. And also had to think about selling. And it's the last thing you think about. The last page on my plan was how much am I going to charge and how am I going to sell it? And the dichotomy is it's very, very hard to do because what we do in this space as a consultant, I'm going to, I'm going to, I'm going to promise to you a future benefit if you pay me now. So if you engage me now, what we're going to do together is going to give you a future benefit. There's very, very few people that want to pay for future benefits. And there's a lot of people in engineering that are hung up um, on mitigating getting out of failure. So, uh, unfortunately, it's a noisy area where something fails, and everybody gathers around, and the obviously the testosterone kicks in, and everybody wants to fix it. So that there's always kind of push towards that. So all I can say is I go to people and say, well, if you've got a problem here, reframe it like this, because sometimes they don't know that's what they're talking about. They've got these problems and they don't know how do they frame it and how do they tackle it. So the idea is to have that discussion about how you frame it, how you take a stepped approach, and how it's not done in weeks and months. Sometimes it's going to be 6 months or a year, and you're going to have to put down what you want in a year, what you want in 3 years, and what you want in 5 years. So it's a case of trying to explain the business benefit to them over time, but they're going to have to make an investment now today for that future benefit. So, um, yeah, it's again for me, it's not something that you generally do when you're working for a business and not for yourself. So you have to
Mhm.
start thinking a different way. Um, I have to think about if somebody is just like a layperson and says, "Oh, what do you do?" I normally say, I'm a painkiller. I'm a painkiller for industry. So if an engineering or an asset group has got a problem, I go in and I relieve their pain. So really, we're an analgesic to people's pain in industry. And again, I've got some great anecdotes about that, where it's the soft part that actually uh, made my job easier within PepsiCo. So I had a new operations manager who, when we had the first discussion, he didn't really see eye to eye. He couldn't see what value I was delivering. Um, so after a few weeks, I found out more about this operations manager. He'd got 3 children under the age of 5. 2 of them were twins, about 18 months old. He was one of 2 operations managers. Now, they were on call from Friday night to Monday morning on a rota. So when they left the plant at 6 p.m. on a Friday night, and they got back on Monday morning, they were on call. And on call meant if a line went down for more than 59 minutes, they would have a call. They would have a conference call with 2 managers that were on shift, and they would tell them what's happening, what's the estimated time of getting the line back up, and they were going to call them back when it was done. So if this guy got a call at 3 a.m., it woke his kids up, his wife up. He had to get up and go down to the kitchen, take a conference call, and then probably 5:30 in the morning, it all happened again. Have to get up Saturday morning, and I knew that this happened to this guy a few times. So the next time we had a conversation, I said, "I thought about what I can do for you, Paul." He said, "Well, what's that?" "How about I can guarantee I'll stop the calls when you're on call at the weekend, that you will not get those emergency calls." He went, "Oh, wow, that'd be." I said, "Well, that's what we're in the business of. I'm in the business of stopping the emergency calls that get you and your kids out of bed at a weekend." And he became a massive advocate of what we did in the plant, because we did. Very, very few and far between was he ever called up, because as our the reliability of the plant was increased to its maximum availability due to its design. We could guarantee a line would come up for like a 12-day run, and there'd be no interruptions. So he could see, we're still friends now. He's now a consultant, come out of PepsiCo. We often talk about, uh, he works in the operations field, I work in this field, and he'll sometimes ask me for advice so he can use it with his clients. And that's a free exchange that we have.
Yeah, no, it's great. So, number one, for people to get in touch with you, for me, I think they should just find you on LinkedIn if they're not already seeing some of the things that you put out on the feed. Sometimes I call it. I don't know if I'm right about that,
Yeah.
but folks, it's Andy Gailey, uh, Gailey, and it is Uptime Consultant Limited. That's Ltd. You find them there, and the other thing I want to ask about, is there any other best way for people to reach out to you?
I'm active on LinkedIn every day. So I do sift requests. So uh, people send me requests 3 or 4 a day that I get connection requests, and there's probably 75% don't get connected. I, I'm I've got to be on focus. So if somebody's like a nail technician, or uh, I don't know, some bizarre industry I've got nothing to do with, I don't particularly want to be a friend on LinkedIn. But if you're in the same industry as us, and if you would send me a message that says, "Hi Andy, I saw you on a podcast," we're connected. And I always send a welcome message, and I'll always share some content freely with people. I think that's the best thing to do.
Good
So
deal.
yeah, LinkedIn,
And
I'm on it every day. So
I like it. I like it. And so I want to ask one last closing question. This is something I ask. So I usually do this fun question segment,
okay,
and I do, favorite music, favorite sport or hobby, and then there's the third one. I'm going to skip right to the third one
okay,
because I kind of mixed it up for this episode. And the question I want to ask to close out this episode is, what is your philosophy, perspective, opinion, anything at all on the concept of work life balance? And I know you already gave us a little bit of a
Yeah.
taste of that. But tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I've always been I don't know, well, right from an early age, I've always been aware of death. It sounds a bit morbid, doesn't it? But yeah, I always, and looking at the asset type of environment, this is the main asset. So I look after this first. Uh, there's a great book, if anybody wants to dig deeper in this, a book called 4,000 Weeks. 4,000 weeks, you'll be around 77 years old. I'm 80% into that. So that's obviously a wake up call that I've only got 20% of that left. And that's why I want to enjoy this time. Um, I don't I don't understand the concept of retirement. So a lot of the guys at my age, they talk about only 4 years to go, only 5 years to go. Now I can retire because I enjoy what I'm doing so much that that doesn't really uh, equate. I don't know. It's not. So work-life balance. Uptime Consultant, if somebody said, what is it? Uptime Consultant is a lifestyle engineering business. So this business drives our lifestyle. So it's a very, very weird concept. It's only ever going to be two people. There's never going to be a third or fourth or fifth person. We're not going to be we don't chase six-figure sums of money. We don't need to. We want to do really good work for really nice people that appreciate it and that we both gain some laughs along the way and the benefit of working together. So I know we talked about as well about money. Uh, I'm I'm genuinely not. I don't care about money, and that's because I have just enough. And I always say money's like lubrication, and I've seen this with people in life that if you don't have enough money, life's sticky. It's not very you don't get along very well. It's very very abrasive. If you've got just enough money, like to go out and buy a beer or to go and watch a film or go out to a restaurant, uh, everything's cool. You're slipping and sliding along. You're not out of control. But I've seen people that have strived and gone and became millionaires through businesses or millionaires through sellouts, and they're the most unhappy people I've ever come across. And I think it's because that too much of this good thing, it's like too much lubrication. You end up slipping and sliding all over the place, and you haven't got a good grounding. So uh, I I see as having enough to do what we can do every day and have a good life. Um, yeah, so I don't do the lottery or anything like that. I don't.
Wow, there's a lot to process there, and I'm like trying to do it right now. I don't think I can do it for the episode, but I really love the analogy there because I don't know, you feel something from it. So, Andy, I really want to thank you for making the time to come on CMMS Radio. I know you and I've been working on making this happen
Yes.
for a
Yeah.
little over a year. Can
About
you
a year.
believe
Yeah.
that?
Yes. Yeah. I know. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. When he came back, I thought, oh, I thought he forgot about me. But when he
yeah,
came back the other month, I thought, oh well, yeah, it's going to happen then. That's good.
yeah,
That's cool.
yeah. No, it's brilliant. I really appreciate it, and we're gonna do it again. And again, just want to thank you. Uh, so we'll see you next time, but stay with me.
Yeah, I will do, definitely. Yeah, yeah, and I'll when I see it, I'll share it far and wide. And I've actually got a new YouTube channel because I had an old one,
What's
and
it called?
it's actually called Uptime Consultant Limited.
Okay.
Spookily, and I'm building it in the background at the moment, so I'm loading some videos. I've done some work for a client that's looking at thermal images,
Hmm.
so I've done quite a lot of videos about thermal imaging. Would you believe? So it's good to revisit that. But I'm going to do some maybe reviews of books about reliability because you can see I yeah I read everything I can get my hands on and study them and maybe some of the tools and the methods that I think work because I need to, like you said before, I need to share as much of this stuff now because I'm
Yeah.
aware of time
Yeah.
so that it can help somebody else out. I'll freely give it because I can't get round to see everybody.
Yeah.
I
No,
need
it's
to.
it's it's not possible. And So give me just a second. Stay on with me here. Did you find this episode helpful? Please send us some feedback, suggest a topic, or ask a question. Reach out to CMMS Radio if you need a co-pilot on your CMMS project. Visit CMMSradio.com and use the What's on Your Mind link. Thank you for tuning in to CMMS Radio, your resource for all things CMMS, from selection to implementation, to help you make better choices, learn from industry experts, and have a successful CMMS journey.